Hello and welcome everybody to the Attention Mechanism. My name is Justin Robert Young, joined as always by my friend, your friend, Andrew May.
Hello, Justin.
You know, we got a lot to go over. We need to talk about Kimi and whether or not this is a full shakeup of the world of frontier models. Has China indeed caught up or surpassed the American frontier labs? What the American government's response to it is going to be. The ever-evolving Claude subscription situation. And then, you know, it already feels like a month ago, but we didn't do an episode last week. So we have not given our thoughts on the move from Codex to ChatGPT work and 5.6 or Soul. What do we think? What do we like? What do we not like? But let's start with our the Chinese question. Have you played with Kimi? What do you think about the reaction to this model so far?
I've used it a little bit. Really more paid attention to some of the people I think who are kind of high taste users and what they say. Looks like a very capable model. Looks like another success for the Chinese open source models. From a capabilities point of view, you know, every time a model comes out and you get some metric that comes close or surpasses at one benchmark from an American lab, you get this, it's they've caught up. No. I think that, like, you know, like in design arena, it was like number one, which I think, you know, could be very likely. I think that there might be areas where these things are going to be very strong. But when I look at, like, one is that you'll hear these things too, like, oh, it's 90% cheaper or whatever. It's like, oh, it's not. It's
yeah.
When you look at the cost, what it costs to use, and you compare it to, certainly compared to Anthropic, because their models are priced like crazy high. But when you count the number of tokens used, whatever, and compare it to like an OpenAI model like 5.6, you find out that it's competitive. You know, it may be slightly cheaper, competitive, but actually not as good in the total frontier that it is there, but still useful, still very useful and cheaper in some ways. But not the, you know, and also, like, there is no magic bullet they had for making it more efficient. You know, it swaps using some things on chip to larger amounts of memory, and it's still expensive and costly to use. You'd still need like 64 GPUs to use it. You know, it's like we saw with DeepSeek, you know, you have to sort of get past the breathless reactions that people want to tell you something excited and say this. You also don't want to be blind to improvements. And I would say that Chinese models have gotten really good. Do I think that they've closed the 6th to 7th month gap? It depends on how you look at it. We have to remember that 5.6 and Fable, aka, you know, Mythos, were being tested internally for months. And this model still, Kimi is still not really a Fable or 5.6 quite capable model. You know, You could say, oh, it did on these benchmarks. Like, yeah, but 5.3 in a hardest could do that too. You know, and so you have to sort of evaluate, like, you know, have we gone from a 5 to 7 month window to a 5 to 6 month window? It's possible. So I don't want to lock myself into thinking like, oh, they're going to be perpetually behind. There's no way they could catch up. It's hard to imagine that because, as we know, and a big part of what makes these models work is distilling frontier models. And I see discourse online where sometimes people want to go, well, they're only good because they copied American models. Like, well, no, that's not true. And others be like, oh, no, are you just distills cope? You're just coping by saying it's distilled. I'm like, well, they went moonshot, you know, Alibaba. So, you know, they went through the trouble of, like, in Moonshot's case, like taking 3.4 million conversations from Claude, which Anthropic tracked, and said they used 3.4 million conversations, long context things to distill to put into their model. If they didn't need to do that, why would you do that? Well, they did it. You know, why are these companies creating like thousands of fake accounts to be able to use the American model, American labs? So clearly they're still distilling. Clearly they're doing that and trying to copy as much capability as they can to do it. But also, you know, I made the point to people who want to say distillation's the only reason it's successful is there's tons of Chinese researchers in American labs. They don't suddenly get dumb if they're in China. You know, there are brilliant Chinese researchers doing stuff. And then we could also the fact that if you don't think industrial espionage plays a part in it, you have to think the most comprehensive, expensive industrial espionage program ever enacted was a failure completely, which is really a bit of a stretch. So I think that we're seeing Chinese researchers doing some very enough things. We're seeing distillation running in place. We're seeing a lot of secrets going there, and we're seeing some very clever people working on some very clever stuff. Am I worried that they're going to surpass the American AI labs? I don't see how that happens. Doesn't mean it couldn't, but I just think that right now it's a hell of a lot easier to be in third place than it is to be in first.
Yeah.
First place is super expensive, and Anthropic and OpenAI and Google are battling each other back and forth for first place, which means spending billions and billions of dollars on things that don't work out, trying a lot of things that are a failure. And if you're in second or third, you get to say, well, won't make that mistake. Oh, we'll do this one, which worked for you guys here, and we'll do this, what worked for you there. Not a bad market to be in.
My take is that this says more about, well, whatever lesson you're taking from Kimi, I would apply toward Meta and Grok. Like where are those labs and what versus these other labs? And maybe that is that one has a little bit more of a green light for distilling than some of the other labs are.
Well, Elon admitted on the stand.
I don't know. What was that?
Yeah, Elon admitted on the stand that Grok had distilled from OpenAI.
Yeah.
And
maybe they should be further ahead. It is, from all intents and purposes, a very impressive model. The one thing I will say about the benchmarks is that it is on the honor of the Frontier Labs to highlight how valuable they believe the benchmarks are, weighed against the hype capabilities of the benchmarks. And we've spoken to people at OpenAI where they feel that it is in their best interest if they are consistently reviewing the benchmarks themselves to say these ones are saturated, these ones we feel we need to design harder things and we need to focus on these and focus not on others. I wonder with Moonshot whether it is in their interest to really care about that, or if some trained data that, totally knocks out a benchmark or benchmax is something that they care about. Like they would rather the hype, they would rather the attention than to be meticulous about that.
Oh yeah, we know that other than OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, for the most part, nobody else spends the same amount of time post-training models for safety. Also, there have been issues. Sometimes contamination happens. Less concerned about contamination because ultimately they know that people will see the benchmarks first, and that's what they'll run with and go look at the benchmarks. Now, what we've seen with Google is Google's in a weird state. Google has some of the best talent in the world, has incredible resources. Not the disparity though is different than it was a year ago. We used to talk about Google had all the money. Now OpenAI and Anthropic have tons of money and tons of compute, and it's a different landscape. And a lot of people are still thinking Google of 3 years ago. Google competing against Anthropic and OpenAI now, very different than it was a year or so ago. And people have updated that to understand that it's not as though Google has this advantage, and they still do in many ways. But Google has repeatedly launched models that had really good benchmarks, and then when it came to developers and other people, just ignored. They found out, good here, maybe good here, and ignored. And the allegation is that Google, much like they did in the Android wars versus iPhone, really cared about those bullet points. And you mentioned a friend that said, yes, those are the 5 bullet points they'll hit and nothing else. And the problem
that was a friend of mine who's covered the Google ecosystem for a while that may or may not be editing this podcast right now. Said that is his rule of thumb, is that whatever they will list as many bullet points as they have features. If they have 18, there will be 18 bullet points. Yeah. If there is 6, they will have 6. Don't expect anything beyond what they list.
One of the things that was talked a lot about internally at OpenAI, now it's kind of made it out into the bigger sort of AI conversation, is Goodhart's law. And Goodhart's law is basically it applies to everything. The thing you benchmark for is eventually what you become, and it doesn't mean that you're actually good at anything else other than just getting that benchmark. Because the danger is I'm going to build a language model. I'm going to test its choice in verbs, its choice in this, and I'll say those are my metrics for it. I'm like, great, I'll get a model that's really good at those things, but actually kind of sucks at language because I don't have a really good metric outside of that. And I think we've seen that with Google, where things that are pretty hard and good objectives, like their models are very good at video understanding, very good at a lot of things. Like I don't want to just be knocking like saying Google, but when it comes to like general like solving advanced mathematical questions and stuff like that, and outside of some stuff like DeepMind does with doing specially trained models, their general purpose models still aren't quite there. When it comes to coding, there was a report that came out that talked about how internally the state of coding models in Google does not have anywhere near a frontier model for coding. And if I talk to people outside of tech and say, who do you think they'd be? Oh, Google's got to have it. I'm like, no, Google's like the worst out of all of them. And people, it's hard to understand, but it's like you have to think about the corporate culture. It's not a matter of I have this, there's mismatched talent in this building, this much talent in this other building. The talent inside OpenAI and Anthropic is organized differently than the talent at Google. And a lot of the talent at Google has managers, and some of those managers, I know them, are nice people, are not technical. And the only thing they can really measure is to say, well, let's get these benchmarks. And that's how that can be a way that promotions are decided, that if we hit this benchmarks, we get this, because at the end of the day, Sundar wants to walk on stage and say, look, we have the best model in the world because we hit these benchmarks. And then the market will go, okay, cool. And people will be like, oh, I guess Google's number one again. And then a week later, nobody's using them and again, we'll say nobody's using, people use them all the time. But here's the thing. Here's the thing I'll say about Gemini metrics. It's like, oh, Gemini surpassed ChatGPT. Anytime you do a search now, Google, and you click expand, congratulations, you just used Gemini.
You are a Gemini user.
Yeah, it's shoved in front. And I don't find those answers super helpful, to be honest with you. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But like, it's just they literally trying to push that in ways that are kind of weird. So point being is that what you see with the Chinese models is it's about they do campaigns, they promote. There's a huge, they're not just sitting in Beijing and send a model and go, oh, what will they think? Literally, they're hiring influencers, doing all stuff. I get in my inbox as I have, because of my X account and whatnot, I get asked, oh, do you want to promote this or that, whatever. These are huge campaigns to convince you, because the goal of Moonshot is not, and again, it's weird in AI, like, these Chinese people, they're doing it for the good of the ecosystem. No, dummies. It's about market. It's literally go put not let me call it dumb, but it's really dumb. It's market. It's literally let's compete with open source. Let's put open source out there, get people onto their API. Let's destabilize the front runners and keep doing it. And it's business, but it's just weird that people think there's this noble effort there when it's the same tactic that Meta used. People are like, well, how long will Meta do this? Well, until they couldn't come up with a good frontier model, and then they had to stop and regroup. I apologize for saying dummies. I'm sorry.
No, sorry.
But really, if you think that, CCP-backed companies are doing this out of, the goodness of their heart, come on.
Yeah. That's an interesting one that we have. I'll put it this way. In the modern era of China integrating into the global economy, there's a phenomenon called dumping. They put state resources behind a certain industry. They make very, very cheap products that are usable. They flood the market with it. They kill domestic competition. And then you eventually have a stranglehold over that industry. There have been reports that Alibaba, a gigantic tech firm in China, one of the biggest, were told by the CCP, you will not be creating a private model. You will be creating an open source model. Why? Because China's very invested in the idea of open source. So I don't know whether or not that is something that needs to be dealt with from a governmental perspective. We certainly have seen that. We've seen pushback that there was not governmental restrictions put on things like steel years and years and years ago, before that became something that American construction became dependent on. You said on this very show 2 weeks ago, Mr. Andrew Main, that there would be some kind of export or import control when it came to Chinese open source models. That now is a very big conversation in all of the halls of power that are paid attention to, both in politics and in artificial intelligence. Post Kimi, more likely.
Yeah, I again, it's what's baffling to me. It's not like I'm sitting there at the crystal ball a couple months ago going, "Oh, I've seen this thing." Nobody. I'm like, it's like literally, I'm like, "Hey, is that an avalanche up there?" I'm like, what are you going to do? I think it's going to come down. Probably going to come down. Here's it, because once the government decided that they were going to ask OpenAI and Anthropic and presumably Google to put bigger restrictions on frontier models because of concerns about cybersecurity and also bio. Bio is one of these things that not very many people in AI understand, so they just sort of hand wave off. And it's like, I don't think hand waving things you understand when it comes to security is really that persuasive. But anyhow, we've talked about this for months, and now Axios, as you said, is reporting that the administration is considering making some move about the Chinese models, and there are safety reasons to do that, and there are economic reasons to do it. And we can debate the economic reasons, and we can question how serious the safety ones are, but you can't ignore them. And I think that there's a couple different outcomes that happen here. Is that if they say, okay, it's really about safety, not about economics, then they say, okay, we'll create a pathway in which you can use Chinese models. Part of the problem is this: when you have an open source model, is it means that anybody can host it, and anybody with 64 GPUs laying around or whatever, as we all have. But but they do get better and smaller, whatever. It does mean that anybody can host it, which is great. It means because you're then not paying the tax to Anthropic or OpenAI every time you get a token. The challenge is, from a safety point of view, if you're worried about the model outputting things you don't want, like if it's running some cyber attack against the Pentagon, or if it's being used to generate, candidate proteins that could be prions to create some sort of devastating, food supply issue, you can't monitor that. And I will give you all the libertarian reasons to say, to add whatever. But when it comes to people in policy making decisions, that's a concern. At least with Anthropic and OpenAI, with a frontier model, they can say, okay, so you're monitoring all the API traffic. And they go, yes, if we see a bad actor doing it, we can shut it off. Once you ship an open weight model into the world, you don't have any control of that. We saw an early example when Eleuther AI, if you remember them back in the day, when they were creating their kind of versions of the GPT models, and they had like GPT Neo and whatnot, and these were like, open source versions of that. And one of the first things that happened was defense manufacturers who were blocked from using OpenAI and Anthropic models unless, they signed an agreement with Anthropic, neither here nor there, were then saying, great, we can put this into drones and kill chains and all this sort of stuff. And Eleuther lost it because they're like, no, you're not supposed to do that. And when you bring it up with them, because they're like, we're doing noble open source. I'm like, yeah, but your guys are now powering war weapons. And they'd be like, well, don't talk about that. I'm like, you can't ignore that.
Doesn't make it not real.
Yeah, exactly. They wanted to put their finger. Some of the people there, I know friends are talking about, they were upset that it was even mentioned that was happening. I'm like, but it's happening. And so now that's the situation you're at right now, because you could say, well, great, how do we monitor this going forward? Well, I think it's going to be very hard to have a frontier class open source model that is, in the United States at least, that is not being run through a provider that's monitoring the API traffic, that is able to put in safeguards and stop things. I don't see how the current political climate will do this. I heard somebody say, but we'll be able to use it in Europe. I'm like, are you effing kidding me? Are you like literally people who are trying to make you use a driver's license to post on social media, and are like literally banning books? You think they're going to be more open about this? Yeah. Not a chance. So anyhow, you're going to get into a situation. I think the likely situation is going to be that for a certain class category of models, you're going to have a provider who's going to be a provider of record that can provide this sort of gating. I'm not saying I like this idea. I'm just saying I have to live in the world of where things are headed.
Makes sense to me. And if I were, Google or Anthropic or OpenAI, I would have a lot of questions as to why some models are able to not play by the same rules that we had to play by. There were some people today that were looking at Kimi outputs that you can't do on Fable and you can't do on 5.6. And the question then becomes, why are we tying a hand behind our back if this is all just available? Like, either you should allow us to do some of this stuff, or we're going to agree that these nerfs are necessary and we're going to enforce them across the board.
Yeah, I will tell you something too, that we know this is coming though with the idea of the API stuff, because if you listen to Satya Nadella and you listen to Alex Karp talk, there's a lot of stuff that comes out about sort of model stuff, and Chinese models have made an impact where Microsoft's talked about hosting them. And so it would not surprise me that we see this come into play, and then all of a sudden Moonshot signed some deal with Microsoft where all of a sudden, great, we will now be hosting your models in part of the Azure secure cloud, so you can still have access to these cheaper alternatives. And then it's, and maybe Google too. And it's like, guess what? They won, like they get to make those deals and leverage it and offer. They have basically provide from different companies, including theirs. So would not surprise me at all if it ends up being that's where you start to get it. And then if you want to host it yourself, that will then incentivize too, is that we may see the end of frontier open source models at that point, because if you can't legally use them in the United States, it takes away the incentive for the Chinese to continue to release them. They've talked about China maybe not wanting to ship them to the US anyways, because why are they giving this advantage to US companies? Because that's the thing. When you take out Anthropic and OpenAI and Google out of the equation, there are thousands of American companies that use these open weight models, and they're able to compete by using the cheaper models. So, does China want to continue to subsidize American startup culture?
Very, very, very interesting geopolitical game that is happening. There is one player that was affected, and that is Anthropic. They have had a hell of a month and a half. Let's recap, shall we? They have Mythos in Project Glasswing. Then they are told, okay, well, we're going to release Fable, and this is our version of Mythos that we believe is going to be able to be releasable. It has about 72 hours in the sun before it is declared export controlled, and they go through several weeks where this is dragging out and dragging out and dragging out. Finally, they're able to release it. It has about another 3 days in the sun before OpenAI announces that they are going to release 5.6. They eventually release 5.6. It is very, very good. And now you've got a bunch of questions as to how long Fable's going to be in the subscription window. The initial length of time that they had it in was essentially entirely eaten up by this export control fiasco. It's been extended twice. And now there is an announcement over the weekend that you're still going to be able to use it, but it's only going to be for 50% of your tokens, which is there for 100% of the time. I made a joke that this was starting to feel like the short change routine, which if you don't know what that is, go look it up. It's an old con routine because you are constantly changing these denominations. And now the newest rumor is that we are going to see Opus 5, and that is going to be greater in its capability than Fable, which is odd because Fable was supposed to be a part of the Mythos class that was going to be better.
I didn't hear that it was greater.
That's the rumor that I saw. I don't know whether or not it's who knows, right? Everything is just being whispered about on the internet. Is Anthropic feeling the heat because of Kimi, because of the new Grok coding model? Obviously, they're in a blood feud with OpenAI that has its own dimensions to it. But are they starting to feel the heat from other labs, and is that affecting their decisions when it comes to their subscription model?
Well, here's the challenge for Anthropic. Yeah, Fable 5, hands down, great model. Like literally very, very highly capable. extremely good. Great in the ways Anthropic likes to make a good model. For many people, it's just all the ways that really matter to them. There's arguments we met about like some of the frontier math stuff, whatever, although it did apparently solve some frontier math problem now too.
Yep.
Great model. Just demos are great. So let's just say that. 5.6, great model. And they're different. A lot of people comparing them are like, hey, like this is good here. This is good here. And it's not a hands down. Like there was a point where if you wanted to code and you wanted to pay for tokens, you used Opus. Like beyond, there was just Opus. If money wasn't an issue, you just used Opus because it was, for a period of time, was the best model. That ain't the situation right now. 5.6 in Fable, extremely competitive, and a lot of people just switching to 5.6 are happy. But if you can afford Fable and have access to it, then Fable's great. But here's the issue. Fable is $10 per million input tokens and $50 per output token. So 10 million for your input, 50 for your output. Okay. 5.6. $5 per input and 30 per output, okay, for Sol, 5.6 Sol. So you're in this situation where the OpenAI model, and we start looking at token efficiencies, the OpenAI model is actually more token efficient and often uses fewer tokens. You're looking at things where it's half the cost between those models. And that's weird. If you're Anthropic, you have to be going, well, why is this? Why is their model that much more expensive to run? In theory, again, it's weird because it's like, people say, oh, they're juicing up the cost of their tokens and stuff. But when you run open source models on GPUs, you find out they're still not that cheap to run, depending upon it. So they're in a very interesting situation. Ideally for them, Opus becomes their general purpose Fable replacement for the average person, and it's going to be as good as it. I think they could build a model. I think they can train a model that most people don't need to do 30-hour-long Horizon coding problems. That's the challenge, is that when you're building the super frontier model, to ask it, how do I make scrambled eggs is a waste of compute. So no reason why they can't build a better Opus. They have to. But they're still in a disadvantage, and there looks, Theo Brown talked about, like, if you look at like token efficiency, it looks like OpenAI's got some sort of mojo there. I will see. And, meanwhile, looming like the Undertaker, it's GPT-6.
Yeah, which we've heard, this, if you wanted the new smell model from OpenAI, 6 seems to be it. It's the first big train that they have had in a minute. And, rumors abound that it is just waiting in the bullpen to be unleashed upon the populace with a prospective release date of sometime in August. Who knows? Obviously, this is no longer just a thing that is determined inside San Francisco. That decision has to take a plane to DC these days. But we will see. It's been kind of a chaotic time with Anthropic. And I kind of wonder. I wonder about these last 6 months. It does not seem like there's a straight line in the way that OpenAI feels like they've got a North Star. They're focusing on a few things since they've decided to kill their side quests. Their North Star is the app experience, and we'll get to that in a second. Efficiency, and with those two in mind, creating the best model that they absolutely can, because they believe that if it can be served efficiently and you can have usability, those are increasingly the new frontiers that they need to play on, beyond just it having the most insane possible benchmark output that you can do. That those things are huge. And, maybe they got the token, the token strategy that now is just making everything way more efficient than it would be otherwise. But you look at Anthropic and it's like, okay, they feel like a little bit more of a disheveled company today than they did a few months ago when they felt like the more locked in company.
They had last year, they built up a really good reputation for building a great code model. And to their credit, like, I think they've got a great team, and I have friends there, that I think they're doing great work. I have friends in Canada. Don't want to live there, but I love it. I think that they kind of stick to sort of simple principles in a good way, like train better, find your better, train data, understand the data. And they do a lot of things that I think that like OpenAI didn't do. And I think they really earned their success. And I think they focused in areas like business use, whatever, paying a lot of attention to how people in enterprise wanted to use it. I would say there was a criticism against OpenAI, and some of it was fair, that it was kind of like you're told how to do it, not hearing how you wanted to use it. And like, no, do it this way, do it this way. And people are like, no, I need it here, I need it here, I need it here. And I think Anthropic did a great job of listening to that and really has made big inroads in enterprise. And it's full disclosure here, by the way, when Justin and I aren't yapping about this stuff, we run a consulting firm that takes on clients that do large projects that are using Anthropic. Like I would say that a lot of our enterprise clients are using them. So we get a lot of feedback from people about that experience. And we have people going out there and doing installs and training and doing that. So that our experience kind of comes from that. We're very, very aware of what goes on. But I think they did a great job of that. And I think that when they started to get attention, like I think that the Department of War was at the right time for them, because there's this general media hostility or frustration with the administration, and to people coming new to it, looked like, oh, they're standing up to the man. It's like they were the number one contractor for the man for a long time, folks. This is Smith and Wesson takes a stand against the police. It's like, well, I mean, guys, come on. So anyhow, that being said, I think they got a lot of good vibes, but we're seeing. Part of we talk about the growth, part of it is just the limitations, a part of it, like the demand for them is insane, trying to meet the demand for that. And then from a competitive point of view is that I think that people are very quick to go, this person's now the winner. And as Sam Altman famously said, was for every move you get, they get a counter move. And that's the thing he thinks about. He put out a GPT-4, put out ChatGPT, and 7 months later, Anthropic puts out Claude. And also the advantage of Claude was they could look at several months of what went right and wrong with ChatGPT to say, don't do that, do that, don't do that, do this, and built, I think, a very good product that over time got very good, and also just looked at a lot of signal patterns where OpenAI was locked into stuff. So I think they're in a good spot. I think they're going to be in a great spot for a long time. But I do think that people are looking around and realizing the world is very different than when Anthropic was running at Super Bowl ad and doing this stuff. Now they're running like ads that just terrify you.
Let me talk about that one for a second. That ran during the World Cup a few times. In fact, I was in Vegas and I was watching the World Cup on mute because I was doing other stuff. And I just look up and it's just like black screen image. And I'm like, is my cable, is it stuttering? Like, what is happening? Why is this pattern? And then I realized it's an Anthropic ad, but one of the things that I saw was a graveyard. And I'm like, what is going on here? I don't know. I mean, I will say that ad is, to my knowledge, and I would ask you whether or not this is true in your mind as well, it is very true to the internal opinions of that company. I don't know if it was true to the general, if an ad consulting company would be like, oh, this is where you need to go. I think that they have followed from the leadership. This is what Anthropic really believes.
I think that there are I don't want to be too unkind, and I want to be fair, and I probably won't be. But when you talk to scientists, there are kind of two kinds of scientists. And my favorite kind are the ones that go like, I'm an expert in paleontology. I really know a lot about this. I love this. And you go, what can you tell me about this aspect of, somebody who's an expert in, let's say, dinosaurs. You say, what can you tell me about this Cro-Magnon skull? I'm like, it's not my area. I don't understand. What have you heard? Ones that know their lane really, really well. And sometimes they can have multiple lanes. They know their well. Other people go, well, as a scientist, I will tell you this. And I've ran into that before. I've sat there and I've watched, I watched the world's leading expert on a particular kind of dinosaur, juvenile form of a dinosaur, asked a basic biology question about like how they know that we have like Neanderthal DNA, and completely flop it because it's not a DNA guy, not this, but he's like, well, I'm a scientist. And I see that a lot in many fields. I think in AI is that you get people like, I work in AI and I understand complex systems. I think I've solved government, everybody. I think I understand this. And it is
many such cases.
It is very, and I mean, it's an AI thing. It's literally when somebody becomes certainly successful enough, they're like, oh shoot, I have the secret. I have cracked it. And I think sometimes maybe some have, but I think that when they explain it to you, it's much more basic than, no, my brain figured this out. Henry Ford and Walt Disney and even Edison, they all tried to like create like different like cities and planned communities.
Yes.
Yeah, planned communities.
Yes.
Because they're like, I've cracked this, and I think that it is a sign that people kind of when you look around and you go, these apes don't understand it. They need me to tell them how to do it. And I look around and I go, I'm another ape, like I know my lane, but I also know I'm ape-like at a lot of other things. I think it kind of lacks a certain kind of awareness. And I think for Anthropic is there was a thing that came out years ago. Google did this, some division of Google. It was called the selfish ledger. And it was this idea, it was a video they made talking about in the future, how the AI will understand everything about you, make you a bespoke scale and do this sort of thing. And that whole idea of like, you will own nothing and you will be happy about it. The idea that we'll let the machine god run things for us.
Yeah.
And I would say that is sort of a big split in AI. There's some people say, we're going to build the machine god and it will tell us what, and I had these conversations with people who were at that lab early on about like, well, we have great ideas now, like free markets, they're wonderful, but people don't want to use them, because they have a reason not to do it. Often we have very good ideas. The problem isn't that we don't have the good ideas. It's just that people don't feel personally persuaded to do it. And I'm like, what would you like? We'll have the AI help us persuade them. I'm like, that's the wrong answer. If you're human flourishing, it means you do the best job to convince other people to do the right thing. And unless you're dealing with immediately like momentarily catastrophic collapse, you have to kind of let us fall flat on our faces or else we don't continue to develop. So long story short, I would say when I watch Anthropic's marketing and stuff, I feel like these are people like, hey, we got this. We're going to figure this stuff out for you. We're entering a new era and there's going to be the right path, which we figure it out, whatever. And, I find it dystopian.
I think it will surprise nobody that I agree. I find it kind of baffling from a business perspective because I don't know if it plays to the general public the way that it plays in San Francisco. If you are in the mix with people that the people I presume are making that decision are hanging out with in SF, those conversations are a lot more normal than they are in Des Moines than they are to people that are watching.
Sure.
Those sporting events.
Well, but again, I think they know who they're segmenting the audience. And I think that like years ago, there was a movement in the skepticism and atheist world, which you and I were around, towards the brights.
Yes.
And
that was labeling. Yeah. The one sentence descriptor on that was they were looking to label the rational thinking people in the world as the brights, which would presume that everybody that was not the brights would be the dims.
And I had a conversation with a friend who excitedly got off the phone with Richard Dawkins and explained to me this, like, we're going to call the movement the brights. And I'm like, I'm horrified. I'm like, have we all figured it out? Are we really all really that capable? Like, yes, we can. Great. We can poke out the problems and we point out the problems in religious arguments. Congratulations. And we could tell us if we had complete control of the world, how we would make it better. But I'm like, you know what? When I look at some of the data on people who are religious and actually the number of children they have, quality of life, whatever, if you're trying to tell me an objective measure, it's not quite the same, et cetera. And so it was just this weird, like, how disconnected are you when you think that, you're going to outsmart humanity?
Yeah.
And I was frustrated by that, because I think that, we live in a world where we make a lot of bad decisions, but we learn from them. The goal is a government and whatnot to keep us from making catastrophic ones. But the goal is that humanity continues to learn as we evolve, not the elites, not the idea that we create some supreme ruling class, whether it's humans or machines, to guide us away from our own stupidity. I think that humans have become more moral, have become better actors in life, not just because government puts a gun at our head. And I think that's sort of the difference in the idea there.
Let's do some backfill here. We were in Vegas together. We didn't get a chance to do an episode last week. While we were in Vegas, 5.6 comes out, voice model comes out, and we see the dawning of the super app. What do you want to get to here?
I have much more positive reactions now that they've made a number of changes to the super app. We again, producer and host of the OpenAI podcast.
Yep.
We've had a lot of concerns, and we were in conversations about, like, so you're going to marry these things together? You sure? Are you sure about that? And I would say the launch was really rough. I was very frustrated. I felt like things that should have worked the way they should have didn't. And then I was still trying to I still don't quite understand the difference between work and chat, to be honest with you, which is kind of embarrassing. And they finally did things which I was happy with because originally in the app, when they launched the app, if you wanted to, they combined ChatGPT and Codex. You're like, cool. All right. I have an idea in my head how that's going to work. I can open up Codex and I'll have my Codex conversations, I'll have my ChatGPT conversation. I get it, And then they throw on the work thing, which I don't quite get. But then I go in there and I'm like, oh, let me go into ChatGPT, and it pops up a little box in the right corner. I'm like, that's not ChatGPT,
Yeah,
that's a little quick answer box. ChatGPT is a side column.
Yeah, that's a little guy right there. That's not. Yeah, it's not the Atlas side column, nor is it the main. I'm going to have a long conversation that will be very productive thing. That is where Codex is. Curious.
Yeah, and that was a bit. And then again, I know that people working on doing their best, implementing whatever, and so I just shut up. And a few days later, they pushed through an update and they fixed that. They find like, you want ChatGPT to be a ChatGPT sidebar to do that. So I'm like, great, they did that. And so my complaints dropped considerably after that point, because I said, okay, I can work there. I don't know that I'm still find myself going back to my browser to use ChatGPT, because for some reason, the mental tax of clicking between Codex and ChatGPT to do those things is a little frustrating. And I am still very baffled by because I can go into Codex, then I go into ChatGPT, but I can select chat or work.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm
work is Codex, but it's not called code. Or no, hold on. I'm looking at it now. Codex is Codex. No. ChatGPT is ChatGPT. So when you go up at top, it's ChatGPT and Codex. Yeah. I'm not going to pretend I understand it. I understand that this was a hard thing to marry. There was a lot of questions as to exactly how you would marry it. I will say, as an Atlas devotee, I mourn its loss. I have already begun to try to move on to Chrome with the ChatGPT plugin. We'll see. I have wound up doing a lot more stuff though, just through Codex. The one thing that my habits, knowing that Atlas was going away and my workflow on Atlas was going away, I've tried to just do more research and summarization and doc work and agentic work through Codex. And that's actually been pretty good. So I've found myself, it's not the way I would have done it myself, to be startled off a thing that I was using and moved into a new thing, but I have found good efficiencies in Codex. Not to say that I needed any more lessons as to why this is an extraordinary tool, but I don't know. I really, seeing what the super app is, I don't see where it replaces the use that I had with Atlas as my daily driver browser. I loved having a daily driver browser that would record all of that data into ChatGPT, and it would know me better because of where I went and what tabs I kept open. Like that to me was the promise of Atlas.
Yeah, what I found super frustrating is, I mean, besides trying to explain to my 83-year-old father, who I convinced to use Atlas, what he's going to use now, that's fun. I'm frustrated because, like, oh, we're going to move that into Codex. I'm like, cool. I like to switch between apps because sometimes I don't want to be in the same app. Like that was my big criticism. Like sometimes I want to have things all in one thing. Sometimes I don't mind at the back end they're connected, but man, I just like to have one button I click and boom, I'm in my browser. To use the browser inside Codex, it's great, but I got to click 4 buttons or whatever to get there to full screen to do that. And then if I need to go back, I got to click a lot of buttons to go back and do that. And that sucks. It really sucks. Now, here's the thing. You can launch multiple instances of Codex now. I don't know if you knew that. So you can you can literally go in there and have have multiple windows. So that's, if you I think you can even just drag it off. Whatever,
new window.
Yeah. So that's helpful. Okay. And so you can, I'm like, do I go in and just try to use the browser in there? And I get it. It's not easy. I was just frustrated though, because now I have ChatGPT, I have chat, and I have work. And
here's the other thing I found weird is that, so I have this idea yesterday. I want to do this fantasy football league where each week somebody gets eliminated. And I'm like, oh, you want to know what's going to be great? Oh my God, I'm going to run this league so amazing. I'm going to have this great group chat. And every week when someone's eliminated, I'll have an anime video of death. Eliminate the anime avatar of the person who is in the league whose team just got eliminated. This is going to be so fun. Everyone will look forward to it every weekend. So Codex, great tool that it is, holds my hand through every tool that I need to use and what the expected token usage was and what services I should use, blah, 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 blah. So it opens up Kling, which is going to start as one of our proof of concept videos. And it's like, okay, Kling is open in the Codex browser. Please add the image gen character reference that we just created. And I'm like, why don't you do that? Codex says, Codex can't use Codex. So I have to open up Chrome so I can use the browser to do it. And I'm like, well, then what's the point of having the browser inside Codex if Codex can't use Codex to submit it? Now, I wound up getting through it with connecting it to the MCP. And once I did that, I can do everything in chat. And that's fine. But if you are trying to replace Atlas, which it could take control of and use computer use to do, then it's not really a true replacement. You're not getting the same usage at it.
Yeah, I'm looking, I have one version of it that's full browser mode, which is fine, but it's not like I know which one's showing me YouTube or this. And
yeah,
listen, the Codex is so damn good. It's so good.
So good.
It's so good. We will endure. And there's so much feedback, and the team is great. The team working on it is fantastic. They're super responsive. Yeah. They're listening to people. They're pushing out updates on a regular basis. they'll figure it out. It wasn't done out of malice. I get that. I think that I feel like, was it done very much from a knowledge code worker point of view, though, that how it was sort of used? And was there a lot of it? Did they have enough input from normies and other people? I don't know. I'm devastated by the loss. I mean, this is not an exaggeration. Telling my wife that Atlas was being discontinued was probably the second most awkward conversation I've ever had.
I can't say on this podcast what your wife is willing to trade to bring Atlas back. I can't even say on this podcast, but
we'll just say it involves my body. Let me make that very clear.
It does.
Yeah,
it does. All right, let's move on to things that I think we are both very, very big fans of. Sites to me is a revelation. It is phenomenal. And with, I think, a few little tweaks in maybe automatically setting your preferences to security or having defaults that you normally launch it at, or maybe easier invite links or something where things are a little bit more intuitive, I think it'd be a perfect product. I'm a huge fan. In fact, one of the first things that I did with 5.6 was talking to our friend Brian Brushwood about it. He was on a vacation with his 3 daughters, all of whom are very anti-AI. And so I sent him a one-shotted site that was a card using peer-reviewed psychological data about how to have difficult conversations about artificial intelligence with teenage girls, and sent it to him. It blew him away. He said he was like engrossed in reading it. And then I said, yeah, I one-shotted that with 5.6, to which he just responded, 5.6 is out too? So a flawless victory for me. I'm a huge fan of it. I've used sites all the time. I use it for myself so I can understand data a lot easier than just having it in one big block of text. I've used it to explain and understand ideas with other people. Just 10 out of 10. Love it.
I've been using for the longest time Cloudflare. Like, I've got these Cloudflare subscriptions and stuff, and Cloudflare makes it very easy to deploy stuff, and it's just gotten better and better. And what's nice is that I think sites may actually be using Cloudflare, but it's created this very, very simple way to build stuff and share them. There have been OpenAI and Anthropic have had different versions of sharing things like this, but you got to click through whatever. They didn't just feel like websites and feel like this. And we've talked about like vibe coding, getting into the idea of just one of the problems is distribution and how you do that. Here, you can make it only you have access, or you can make it gated and other things, and they're adding more capabilities there. I love it because it used to be that a website was a precious thing. You had to hire somebody to build and deploy for you. Now it's super easy to do that. And you can build. My wife, I think, is like, we took away Atlas, but now she's a huge Codex user. I had to upgrade her to Pro because she was burning through them tokens. Limited.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think that for just being able to spin stuff up and share them, it's just great. I'm excited about this future of being able to build and share.
Have you gotten a lot of use out of the new voice mode?
No.
I gotta say, big fan, huge upgrade. Yeah. I would give it a spin in the car.
I just don't. Yeah, I mean, I have very spotty cell phone network, so like it's
on your drives. No, I've found it really, especially car stuff. I trust it a little bit more. It's been more of a reliable finder of news for me. It's been a better explainer for me. I've been able to have far more natural conversations. I have found since they upgraded it, I have not ended a conversation because it couldn't do a thing. I ended a conversation because I just didn't have anything else to say with it.
Yeah. I find, I use speech a lot, but I don't, I don't know. I mean, I still interact with these models like tools. So I'll have conversations from time to time. We'll do that. But yeah, I'm not in the car as much as you. So that's part of it.
My biggest complaint with it is that it's good enough that I wish it had more information. Like it is right there where I'm like, I wanted to check my email. I wanted to have like full integration into my life. I wanted to be able to do things that right now it cannot do, not because it can't talk to me, but because it doesn't have access to it. And I assume that is coming. In fact, you know, a lot has been said about, you know, some of the future products of OpenAI. One of them being something that would interact with you in your home. I think this is a huge cornerstone of that. I think they're well on their way to. I'll put it this way: if Siri or Google Home or Amazon's Alexa were as capable as this voice mode, the world would be a better place. They right now have far and away the best interactive assistant, bar none. There's really no comparison.
I would love a faster voice model in Codex when I go, because I bark all my commands to it, and I got the whole new little Codex controller thing to press the keyboard.
You did?
It's slow. Yeah. Of course.
Oh. Where did you get that? I was
they OpenAI their supply code was a limited availability. It's got, look at the back.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I built an app for writing, and like I use voice when I write, and I wanted a persistent thing here, and I use a local model on this. So let me try this. This is me talking into my app using a local model. This is great. Congratulations. Have a great day. Glad we could talk. That's great. Apple's new model.
Very fast.
That's their new, brand new speech model. Really, really fast. Kudos to, we talked about this, the thing I was looking for to Apple to do. So, same thing, because I'm using Codex. It's going, I'm like, just use this local model. Like, it's amazing that you can do that with. So.
All right. Well, man, what a tour of the AI world. Mr. Andrew Main, where can people find you?
Go to openai.com/podcast.
Yeah. By the way, 2 million subscribers on OpenAI's YouTube channel. They had a great retrospective of all the things that have been posted on that channel. Who pops up but the handsome face of one Andrew Main, the OpenAI podcast, getting a little love in the montage. Very, very exciting here.
Yeah, that was really cool. Very, very proud to be part of that. And if anybody here hears our criticisms,
we love all of you.
We're characters. We're merely playing characters. I mean, that was the beauty of it too, is that OpenAI said, hey, we want to have you. You're no longer an employee here. You can be a little bit more free and a little bit more honest and critical. And that was one of the things I really respected about that, was they wanted somebody to host it who was no longer on the org chart, and who could, we took it on not because we were looking for podcast projects to do for Interdimensional, but because we loved being able to ask questions and to hear firsthand how things are going on and go like, why did you do this?
Yeah, it's been a phenomenal opportunity. We're very thrilled to have had it. And I'll just also say that, I mean, 2 of the people that were part of the rollout for the new app were 2 of our favorite guests that have ever been on the podcast. Now Saint, Thibaut Socio, and Tasia Patwardhan, or Patwardhan, and Pat Warden. And they were phenomenal on it. They've been great on the show. We're very excited to be a part of that channel, and hope to continue to do it. So that'll be where you can find me as well. Head on over to the YouTube channel. If you haven't already subscribed, then do it and watch the OpenAI podcast. It's a good program. There's going to be new stuff coming out soon too. Next episode will be like, man, everything you did was brilliant. The rollout was flawless. Incredible. I mean, but to like, Thibaut's credit, Tebow's gotten a lot of praise because he gets to hit the button and he gets to reset rate limits. He's also not shy about mixing it up with people at other labs when he wants to get a little spicy with it. But that being said, he was unafraid to put his face into the buzzsaw when there's criticism about the app stuff, and he is engaged very, very constructively. He's engaged with good faith, and if you look at the updates that they've made, I think it has been lessons learned, but they are a very responsive company when it comes to their feedback.
I will tell you the culture there, and I've had to explain this to people is, and I said this on Twitter the other day, is I could argue with co-founders. We'd respectfully argue with them, but in Slack, be like, no, I disagree with this, blah, 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 blah. Never was I afraid that I was going to get fired. I wasn't afraid of that. And other people said, other people, not everybody feels the same way. Because I'm like, it was a culture of, we're going to figure it out. We will discuss these things. I would say the other lab, not quite the same way. OpenAI is often like, Sam said, not our best 12 months, not our best 12 months. We should be doing better. And one of the things that I really liked about when people would sit down to talk to us, whether they're working on codecs and stuff, before the podcast rules, they never wanted to be glazed. And they didn't want me to tell them everything awesome. They wanted me to tell them what could be better. Why did you do this? Whatever like this. Because to be honest with you, every day they're going, how do we make it better? And they want to hear where it's not good because they have so many dials they can control to make it better. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about that was they don't want me to go, oh, it's great, guys. Good job. They wanted me to go, this didn't work for me. What about this? Have you thought about this? Whatever like this. And they might go like, well, that's a dumb idea. But point is, it is extremely receptive. They're very active. That company is way more active on social media now than ever. The most proactive company on social media from a Frontier lab. And because they're very empowered, very, very empowered. Tebow presses the reset. Tebow gets a lot of control to do that. And, when it is a culture where you can try something, and if it doesn't work, you're not like, well, you're a failure.
Yeah. Yeah. A very, very interesting time. There is, I think, if part of the philosophy at OpenAI is that they are building a tool, an extraordinarily capable tool, a world-changing tool, but a tool nonetheless, that's how they are approaching it. That's how they're looking for people to point out ways that the tool can be better. Some other labs, maybe they have more invested in the faith that people have in it. Maybe that makes them less likely to engage in some of the more, detailed back and forth because they want to have the belief both in themselves and in the public that they're the ones that can fix it because they have been entrusted in something very, very important. So I don't know. Different ways of looking at it. All right. That's it. We'll see you next time.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.